Is Stephen Dudikov. I'm a GP from Melbourne. Question to Nicole. Non-animal sources of the omega-3s and being ALA and conversion to EPA and DHA. Do you have any comment on that?
Well, I guess, like I was mentioning before, we just try to get them to use things like chia seeds and different types of seeds and nuts to try and get their omega-3s up, because obviously vegans don't tend to like to take their fish oil supplements. So, so we just try and get them to have a nutritional balance with lots of different types of omega sources through their sort of plant-based options to help them get their omega-3 in.
Can I make a comment as well? You can get some omega-3 in seaweed, and also marine algae oil is a vegetarian or vegan and vegetarian supplement as well, which can be used. So supplements can be useful as well. Because if they're vegan and they've also got high triglycerides and things like that, where more omega-3s are going to be useful, so above the RDI of omega-3, that's where supplements can come in. Yeah.
I have a question for the dietitians regarding emotional eating. A lot of people, when they're on sugar, we use sugar as an antidepressant. I have a lady who has a tub of Ben & Jerry's every night to self-medicate her depression. People who switch to LCHF will go through periods of emotional distress, and they'll want to turn, preferably not back to sugar items, but they'll want to turn to something. Ted Naiman cites some studies where if you have a lot of protein leverage, a lot of protein during the day, you're much less likely to emotionally overeat. What little hacks do you guys use as dietitians?
Well, I'm not a fan of mindfulness strategies, as I said. So for me, it's more about really pushing up the focus on those satiating foods. So yeah, high protein, high fat foods, and really teaching people that it's okay if you overeat some days. Like, it's fine. Don't always think that we have to restrict a specific, even if your intention is weight loss, you're not going to be perfect 100% of the time, and you're not going to have, your perfect calorie intake 100% of the time or your perfect macros. You want to do the best you can in each situation. And as I said in my talk, if it's a whole liter of ice cream versus like too much cheese, then you just go for the better option. So that's probably my tip.
I mean, I think, I know we don't want to sort of overstimulate our sugar taste buds as well, but in the beginning, I'll give my clients just, options like a stevia sweetened based chocolate, give them the keto ice cream recipe. Diet Doctor's got a fabulous dark chocolate flourless cake that he has. So I think, in the beginning, we have to give them plenty of fat and protein to make them feel full, but they do want those options. So I think in the beginning, you can give them alternatives. And then as they sort of transition along the pathway, they find that they just self-regulate themselves. So we don't want to say don't eat them, because they're going to go away and want to eat more. That's I'm sure we all can connect with that. So when they have lots of fat and they have lots of protein, they feel fuller for longer. But I often will give them options that have a sweet alternative to it to help them through that time. And then as they get more control and they realise, I'm not hungry, I don't crave anymore, they naturally tend to drop those things back, and we didn't tell them, and that's a lot more empowering for them. So I find that's what works well.
I have a question for Maryanne too, actually. It's great that we have access to data from clinical trials, previous underlying data, and it's going to take a mountain of scientists to pour through it. But the other question is, there's a heap of clinical trials, more than a heap, that failed, and that data isn't published. So is there any grounds afoot to make that data available? Because not only is people redoing the same stuff because they don't know it has been done before, and it's costing resources from limited budgets away from things that could be better spent on things that hasn't failed already. And it would be nice to, if there's a list of things that has been tried, and if there are people pushing for that to go through. That's the one question. And the other question is, where are we now with the Cochrane situation, with Peter Gutcher leaving, and that was our last resort. That was the highest place we could go for things that we believe in. And now that's sort of thrown up in the air.
To answer your first question, sorry.
Just to answer the first question, all clinical trials need to be registered, either on clinicaltrial.gov or alltrials.com, and so you can directly respond to the principal investigators and ask them for their data. The problem with all of those failed clinical trials, even though they've been done and not published, is that we have regulatory agencies, for example the FDA, they will approve the use of an antidepressant, for example. If 20 clinical trials have been done, you only need 2 that prove that antidepressants are better than placebo. So 2 out of 20 trials and they'll still approve the drug. So the problem rests with the drug regulatory agencies. They really need to improve the way they decide to market a drug or not. To answer your second question, that's in a bit of a state of flux at the moment. It's public knowledge that Professor Peter Goetscher was sacked from the governing board of the Cochrane collaboration, and he had his membership revoked. He's still the director of the Nordic Cochrane Centre, and at this stage he plans to run the centre independent of Cochrane collaboration. There were many disagreements between Professor Peter Goetscher and the leadership of Cochrane, and I think that the Nordic Cochrane Centre still exists, it'll still run, it just won't be under the guise of the Cochrane collaboration, which I don't think is particularly a bad thing. I mean, the good work will still go on.
Maryanne, this is probably directed to you as well. Now, for all of us who work in the area as GP, but enjoying treating type 2 diabetes, something massive had changed in the way studies are done, but we don't talk about it. So ages ago, one of the drugs, rosiglitazone, had shown an increase in non-fatal myocardial infarctions, and suddenly the whole world changed. Now every study is going to prove that we're not going to cause any harm, but we don't need to prove that we do any good. So the trouble now is that we've got a lot of diabetic drugs that are no better than placebo in anything because they don't have to prove it does anything good.
I think, again, that rests with our regulatory agencies. Why are they approving drugs that are not different to existing ones? This has happened multiple times with antidepressants. They'll produce a new antidepressant with a slightly different chemical structure, call it a different name, and it's no more better than the existing drugs that are on the market. And all it's doing is draining our healthcare system because we're subsidising these drugs, these new drugs that come on the market. They end up getting put on the PBS, taxpayers fund these drugs, and they're no more better than the existing drugs. I agree with you, it's a bad situation.
Yeah, thank you.
Over to you, Richard.
I think that might be all the questions for today. So, and I think we're done for today. Thank you very much, everyone.